Hey guys, so I know there's a lot happening in the news and there's a lot of worry and concern about what's about to happen in this country. And there's also a lot of Christians having dreams, prophetic dreams that may be telling us more detail about what's coming. I want to get to those things. I do think that we need to be aware and ready, because I do think there are some hard times coming for our country. But it's my intention to help you see that what's coming is connected to the Bible, to prophecy, and that it's specifically connected to the second seal of Revelation. But to understand that, you first have to understand what happened to the first seal. So we're going to continue that discussion. In the previous video, I talked about why President Erdogan of Turkey is a very strong candidate for the Antichrist. I also said I've never said that about anybody else before. And I began laying out the reasons why we might begin to suspect him. He fits so many of the requisites, such as he is leading Turkey at the right time. There are Muslim leaders referring to him as the Mahdi. We've seen his spirit in what ISIS has done as far as persecution of Christians and Kurds and Armenians. Just the evil that's come out of them, that reflects his heart and who he is as an arrogant, evil man. We talked already about how he's starting to refer to himself in divine terms, and how he built himself illegally the largest house in the world. But there's more. There's a lot more evidence that he may be the Antichrist that's long been foretold. And I wouldn't be saying that I suspected he was if there wasn't a lot of strong evidence. There's so many theories that have been thrown out over the years about who it is. I know that. I know you've heard some of them. And I know they always sound crazy. I'm not trying to approach it that way. I'm not just randomly throwing this out. There's a real candidate. He's fitting. He's really fitting. This is not my pet theory or theology, or anyone's pet theory or theology. This is just using scripture and asking, ourselves, what does it really say? And what do we need to be looking for? Anyways, let's talk about the next evidences for why he makes such a good candidate, right? So if you're familiar with prophecy, you're well aware that the books of Daniel and Revelation have a strong alignment, and they both refer to empires and symbolizing these empires with animals, which is why the empire of the Antichrist is referred to as the beast. There's a beast in Daniel and there's a beast in Revelation. Both of them have 10 horns, and those 10 horns would represent 10 nations or 10 leaders that are co-leading. In fact, the Bible specifically says that they co-lead with the Antichrist for a short time. Now, the beast of Revelation has 7 heads, and those 7 heads are, everybody's in agreement, and I think every scholar I've read understands that those 7 heads represent the 7 world empires that have ruled over Israel throughout history, beginning with Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece under Alexander the Great, then the Roman Empire. Then the Roman Empire was split in two and became the Eastern Roman Empire, which then became the Byzantine Empire and ruled over Israel still, and then the Ottoman Empire, which was based in Turkey. Now, the book of Revelation says that the 7th head was killed, and then comes back. A lot of people interpret that to be referring to the Antichrist himself, as if the Antichrist himself is going to be assassinated or looked to have been assassinated and then brought back to life. That may be. Don't know that it won't happen. I just know that the 7th head is not the Antichrist. It's the Ottoman Empire. And it's the 7th empire that has ruled over Israel. Now, the Ottoman Empire is dead. It's gone. After World War I, it was no more. However, there's a leader who wants to bring it back. Yes, we're back to President Erdogan. He wants to, as he said, establish the Islamic caliphate. Now, the caliphate, by definition, would not be a single nation empire, okay, like China would want to establish. or Russia. The caliphate would be a coalition of Muslim nations, different nations, a confederacy of nations, united under the leadership of the supreme Islamic ruler, the caliph. Erdogan says that's what he wants to establish, which would become an Islamic superpower. And he's also described it as a revival of the Ottoman Empire. So if he does this, it fulfills all kinds of prophecies at the same time. And the 10 horns would indicate that this initial Islamic caliphate will have 10 nations. I believe we get a hint of which 10 nations they may be if you look at the 83rd Psalm. I don't have time to go into that in this video. You can read my book, and I go in detail. And we look at the nations listed. But they are mostly all the neighbors surrounding Israel. Syria and Iraq would be included in those. But what is the process that this beast or this Islamic caliphate is established? Daniel tells us. It says that a little horn, which is the Antichrist, rises up among the 10, and he rips 3 of the horns out by the roots. So this tells us that this leader is going to attack 3 countries and conquer them. But only 3 are ripped up by the roots, which then implies that the other 7 will come under his leadership voluntarily. Everyone that I've ever studied has agreed with that interpretation. Basically, the Antichrist is known. He's going to conquer 3 countries, and 7 will align with him voluntarily. And they make the 10 together. So, but Erdogan has stated publicly he wants to revive the Ottoman Empire. He wants to establish the Islamic Caliphate. The question is then, what's he doing militarily? Well, in 2016, he began sending in troops into northern Syria to fight ISIS. However, as we said in the last video, ISIS kind of melted away. He never really fought them, but he left his tanks and troops there. The Syrian government does not want him there. They keep telling him to leave. He started this back in 2016. He says no, he's got to stay and fight ISIS. But he doesn't. ISIS isn't anywhere to be seen. All he's doing is killing Kurds. Why is he killing Kurds? Well, he hates them. He hates them, and he hates Armenians. He hates them with a passion. And it's kind of irrational, frankly. But I would say supernatural, because when you study the Kurdish people and the Armenian people, they're actually pretty strong candidates for the lost tribes of Israel. Now, if you're not familiar with the concept of the lost tribes of Israel, historically, the people we call the Jewish people, they are Israel, but they represent only 2 of the 12 original tribes of Israel. The tribe of Judah and Benjamin, and Levi, really, so really 3 tribes. But that's where the word Jew comes from. It's short for Judah. In the Old Testament, Israel had a moment of civil war, where the northern tribes and the southern tribes separated from each other, and the northern tribes were captured and conquered by ancient Assyria and taken off into captivity. The two southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin, along with the Levites, who didn't really have land, stayed in the south, and they were not conquered until almost a couple hundred years later by Babylon, 150 years later, by Babylon. So since that time, we've always known who the descendants of Judah and Benjamin and Levi were, because they're with us. They're the Jewish people today. But the other tribes are called the lost tribes, because it's not known what happened to them. However, the area the Bible says they went to is the exact area the Kurds live in, and the Armenians and some others. And there's a lot of cultural reasons to believe they're lost tribes. And also, genetically speaking, when they analyze their DNA, they are the closest biological relatives to the Jewish people on earth. So a lot of evidence for that. I'm not saying that authoritatively, just saying, hey, there's that a lot of people think that. And strangely, Erdogan hates them. Why? I don't know. It's explainable, though, if you realize that they are part of Israel, and the Antichrist is going to hate God's people, no matter where they are, and even if they don't realize who they are. That said, he sent troops and tanks in northern Syria, so he's got them there still. every time we get distracted, if you pay attention to the news, every time something bad happens in the United States or something big happens in the United States, start looking at international headlines in the Middle East. You'll notice that every time we get distracted with something politically, Erdogan takes more territory. He waits for us to be distracted when we can't say or do anything, and then boom, he takes more territory. He did it during the impeachment. He did it during coronavirus when that first broke. He keeps doing it. That started back in 2016. He just takes more and more ground in Syria, and they don't want him there. But the United States is still around, and he can't really unload everything he wants to in that country until we're out of the way. So right now, he's kind of stuck. But he also put tanks and troops in Iraq, northern Iraq. The Iraqi government does not want him there. They have formally asked him to leave many times. He won't. He keeps establishing more bases. Last count was 11 bases, and I don't know how many tanks and troops. Why? To fight ISIS. Yet ISIS left, and he keeps just killing Kurds in Iraq too. But he won't leave. He's obviously intending to conquer Iraq as soon as he gets the green light. In his mind, at least, until he gets the green light. So that's two countries that he's got tanks and troops in. Now, Libya is also in a civil war and has been for a little while, and they have the two warring factions there. One is led by the quote-unquote House of Representatives of Libya, and the other one is headed by the Prime Minister of Libya. Well, the Prime Minister had pretty much already lost. He had been pushed all the way back to just holding territory in Tripoli itself. The House of Representatives had taken the rest of the country. Erdogan has helpfully stepped in. Earlier this year, he sent tanks and troops and other aid to the Prime Minister's army, and now he has reconquered half of Libya. So together, Syria, Iraq, and Libya are three countries, right? We said the Antichrist has to conquer three. Now, are those going to be the three if he is the Antichrist? I don't know. I'm not saying that for sure because he hasn't conquered any of those for sure. I would think, though, if he is the Antichrist, Syria and Iraq almost certainly would be part of it because they're so close. But Libya may not be. Maybe a different one is the third one. Right now, he's sending a lot of military aid to Azerbaijan to help them attack Armenia. So there's lots of different possibilities. Greece is also building up their military defenses because he's taking territory illegally out in the Mediterranean Sea. I don't think Greece will be part of the original Islamic caliphate just because they're not Muslim. I do think he will take them later, but not yet. So anyways, there are three countries right now he's got tanks and troops in. That's significant. If in the end, though, we see Erdogan take four countries, like conquer four countries, that might disqualify him because the prophecy is three. It's got to be three. But we'll keep watching. My expectation, if he is the Antichrist, is that he will at some point fully conquer three countries, and then 7 more Muslim nations, neighbors of Israel, will unite under him, and there will be a 10-nation caliphate. Okay? And that'll be the beginning of the beast. That's not where it ends. That's where it begins. So something else about Erdogan. And this is a strange one, but he is demanding that Germany return something called the altar of Zeus. Now, in Revelation, in books 2 and 3, chapters 2 and 3 of Revelation, those are 7 letters that Jesus sent or asked John to give to 7 literal churches in what's now Turkey. One of the churches was the church in a city called Pergamum. And in it, Jesus says to them, I know where you live, where the seat of Satan is. What was he referring to? Well, scholars are in agreement that what Jesus is talking about there is the altar of Zeus that was in Pergamum. It was one of the ancient wonders of the world. And when you hear you hear described altar of Zeus, you mentally might be imagining like a square altar where sacrifices were made. That's really not what it was. It was much, much bigger. It was Just think, you can look it up online and you'll see a picture of it. It's huge. It's rows and rows of stairs, columns with the altar in the center. It was basically an altar, a huge kind of platform arena type thing that was designed to project power. It's designed to project power. And in the 1800s, some German archaeologists discovered it. They uncovered it. They unearthed it. And they took it, dismantled it, and they took it back to Germany. And they built a museum around it in Berlin, of all places. A huge museum, obviously, because this is a huge thing. And Hitler loved this thing so much that he had it recreated in Nuremberg. And he gave all of his speeches, a lot of his big speeches from it. You know, a lot of the images you have of Hitler speaking from this podium with all these columns behind him and all these Nazis lined up in rows in front of him, that is a recreation of the altar of Zeus. So here's where it gets interesting. Remember, Jesus called this thing the throne of Satan, or the seat of Satan. Erdogan has demanded it back. Now, why would a radical Muslim leader want a pagan altar? You say, well, he says he wants it for his Vision 2023. Yes, that's right. He's got a big announcement he says he's planning to make in the year 2023. What is it? We'll see. My personal guess, I think he's going to announce the caliphate. But his Vision 2023 program is something where he has said that he wants Turkey to be in the top 10 global economies in every way, militarily, economically, in tourism, you name it. He wants it to be in the top 10 by 2023. Now, frankly, the only way he can really hope to do that is by conquering a couple other countries like Syria and Iraq. But if he took just Syria and Iraq, that would automatically propel him up to the number 9 position in the world economies. So, not so far-fetched, he could do it. But here's the thing. He told Germany, he said, he was pretty upset. He said, you're going to give me that altar back. And they said, no, we built an entire museum around it. You know, we can't just give it to you. And he said, you're going to give that thing to me, or I'm going to send you millions of refugees, including ISIS warriors. Suddenly, after he said that, the museum closed down mysteriously for remodeling. And they put out a press release and said, you know what, we're not going to be able to reopen for about 5 years because we just so much remodeling to do. It went on for a few years, and then a couple years later, they issued a new press release, and they said, you know, we've run into some construction snags, and we don't think we're going to be able to open again for 8 more years. So we're not going to be able to reopen for people to see the altar of Zeus again until 2023. They also said, in the meantime, for safety, we have dismantled the altar of Zeus and removed it from the museum, and we've placed it in the hands of a private collector for safekeeping. I don't know. Where do you think it is? I think it might be in Turkey, but time will tell. Anyways, so that's something else that's very interesting. And if he is the Antichrist, he would want his father's throne, because the Antichrist will be the son of Satan, just as Jesus is the son of God. So, something else the Erdogan has done. He is calling on Muslims to unite against Israel. These are some of the most recent headlines. He's calling on Muslim countries to unite against Israel. And recently, just a week or two ago, he specifically declared that Jerusalem, what is quote-unquote ours, meaning Muslims. So Jerusalem is ours. And he implied that they were going to take it back. That's concerning. However, we have the strongest piece of evidence of all. The book of Revelation tells us this is really the evidence to know if someone is the Antichrist or not. What is it, you say? Well, if you look at Revelation 13, it says, here is wisdom. Let him who is understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Let me read that again, and I'm just going to read more of the context. This is in the passage that talks about the mark of the beast. And it says, in the whole passage here says, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. It says, let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. For it is the number of man, his number is 666. So what does it mean by that? Well, ancient languages like Greek and Hebrew didn't have separate symbols to do math for numbers. They reused the same Greek or Hebrew letters to do math. They just assigned certain numerical values to each letter. For example, in the Greek alphabet, alpha, which is the first letter, has a value of 1. Beta has a value of 2. And you go on down all the way to theta, which is 9. You get the iota, 10, and then you go 10 to 90, and then 100 to 900. And those were their mathematical numbers. So any Greek word could be read as a word, or you could add up the letters, the number values, to get a total number. So now I'm going to let's talk about how that applies to the Antichrist. Well, it says that the number of his name, meaning whatever the Antichrist's name in Greek is, like if you take his name, you transliterate it to Greek letters, then find the number values, whatever those numbers add up to. If it adds up to 666, you've got it. Okay, that's the Antichrist. That's the test. It's telling us, let him who is understanding, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of his name. Right? Now, it says 666, though, is the number of man. A lot of times we think it's evil. It's really the number of man. Why is 6 the number of man? Well, 7 in the Bible is the number of completion. Man without Jesus is incomplete. Therefore, 6 is our number. But 8 then is more than complete, right? 7 is completion, so 8 is more than complete. 8, therefore, is the number of God, because only God is more than complete. It's also the number of new beginnings, like the resurrection, etc. So, every early Christian knew that if you take Jesus' name in Greek and add up the number values, you will get 888. 888. Perfect God. They knew this. It was just one more evidence that Jesus was divine, that he was who he said he was. These early Christians knew this. John, the Apostle John, knew they knew this. Therefore, he's telling them, just as Jesus' name adds up to 888, the Antichrist's name will add up to 666. So, I can tell you, and if you want to see the calculations, you can get a copy of my book. It's online. It's in print. You can look at it. I'm not going to be able to show it on the screen, this video. But I have been testing names for a long time, since high school, college. Because I understood what this meant. I understood it meant that the Antichrist name would add up. So I have tested every name you can think of. I tested Bill Clinton. Didn't add up. I tested Hillary Clinton. Didn't add up. I tested Obama. Didn't add up. I tested George Bush. Didn't add up. I tested Donald Trump. Didn't add up. I tested the Pope. I've tested every leader in Europe you can think of. I tested Vladimir Putin. Didn't add up. I've even tried to look at lesser leaders in Europe when I thought the Antichrist was going to be European years ago. None of them added up. Some people even said Prince Charles. I tried it. It doesn't add up. It's kind of a silly theory anyways, but I tried it. Yet nobody's name adds up. And I discovered that it's actually really, really difficult to get someone's name to add up to 666 in Greek until Erdogan. His last name is the first name I've ever tried in 25, 30 years of trying names that has actually added up to 666. That is a strong proof. You may not think it is, but go out and try. Try to add up other names. Just Google ancient Greek letters and their number values. You'll find the chart. It's in my book as well if you want to look at it there. Now, if you're trying to add up his name, I tell you to get the actual Greek spelling of it, which you can find in Greek newspapers. You can see the letters there. One thing to keep in mind is that his name will typically be transliterated with a G sound for gamma, and gamma has a value of 3. However, that isn't a good transliteration because in Turkish, his name is spelled with a G, and the G has a little hat on it, which means it's that G sound. It's the swallowed G sound, which is actually related to a Q in modern English. And in ancient Greek would correspond to the ancient Greek letter of kappa with a Q, which had a value of 90, not 3. So when you write it with that spelling, it adds up. Anyways, those are what I believe are some pretty strong evidences. So total, we've seen, he's arrogant. People are calling him the mighty. He's talking about himself like a prince in divine terms. Built himself the biggest house in the world. Wants to establish an Islamic caliphate. Already making moves to do so. Has an evil heart. Already persecuting Christians. Already persecuting people that could probably be the lost tribes of Israel. He's got troops specifically in 3 countries right now. And his name adds up. His name adds up. And that is really the one test that the book of Revelation gives us to do. So based on all those evidences, I believe that President Erdogan probably is the Antichrist. Again, I'm not going to say absolutely. I'm a man. It's my best educated guess. Could be wrong. Time will tell. What isn't wrong is Scripture, and if I am wrong, or if anyone else who agrees with me is wrong, it's simply because we haven't understood fully yet. But time will tell, and we need to keep watching him. So far, 5 years ago when I first started believing that he could be, I started saying to myself, okay, well, if he is the Antichrist, he'll do this next. And then he did it. Then I said, oh, well, okay. Well, if he is the Antichrist, then he'll do this next. And then he would do that. And so far, I'm 5 for 5 over the past 5 years. So I think the probability is really strong. And if that is true, you need to get ready, because that would mean the book of Revelation has begun. And it is probably meaning that if the first seal of Revelation hasn't already been broken, that it's going to be broken very soon. My personal opinion is, I think it probably has been broken or is being broken, because when Jesus breaks the first seal, Revelation 6 says, and he was given a crown, conquering and to conquer. Erdogan has been given a crown, meaning that complacent Western nations have told him behind the scenes, yeah, you can establish the caliphate. Because he's promised them a pipeline. He's promised them an oil pipeline if he can establish the caliphate. He's promised them a pipeline from Qatar all the way up through Turkey to Europe, so they don't have to be dependent on Russian oil anymore. He's told them that if he can build this superpower, that will create a balance of power in the Middle East, and it will force Israel to the negotiations table for a peace deal. European leaders like both of those things, and he's threatened them with refugees if they don't do whatever he wants, as the stick in the carrot and stick duo there. So they've given him a crown. They've kind of their intelligence agencies, everyone behind the scenes are saying, yeah, go ahead and do it. We want you to do this. Russia, by the way, doesn't want it because they don't want that pipeline built. The Obama administration was aware and approved of it. Trump administration is really not understanding fully, or at least they're not acting like they understand what he's doing. Maybe they are. Maybe they're, reining him in from behind the scenes. But if so, it just confirms what must come next, which is the second seal, which is the red horseman, which is war, which Zechariah 6 tells us is probably coming to the United States, which is what you're seeing in the news. And I think I have a lot more information for you about what that's going to look like. But for now, study what I've talked about in this video. Look for yourself, do some research yourself. But be aware that if the first seal is being broken or has been broken, we need to get ready for the second seal. Thank you.